Hello, Husky fans, and welcome to a very special live edition of the UConn Pod. This is Aman Kidwai. I'm joined by UConn blog editors Dan Madigan and Dan Connolly. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. We're here to talk UConn hoops as they get ready for their first game at Bubbleville in Mohegan Sun against USC on Thursday night. The Huskies opened the season with a couple of games against in-state opponents. We saw them beat Central Connecticut State 102-75 and Hartford a little bit closer 69-57. First time seeing a lot of new Huskies and also some old Huskies in new roles. Madigan, what were your thoughts after the first two games of action?
I think the most important thing to take away from those first two games is that the first half of the Central game doesn't matter. It's not worth taking any sort of info out of that first half. It was very clearly rust from the longer layoff, the longer offseason due to COVID, and the team not practicing for really 14 days. They've only had, I think, 5 or 6 full practices since the positive COVID test in early November. So I think that was the biggest takeaway for me. Central, clearly a bad team. UConn ended up rolling them. That's the most important part. I was really impressed with how James Bouknight came out. We didn't always see that last year. He was super aggressive at the start. Very clearly the best player on the floor, but he looked that way for the entire time that he was out there. So it's good to see him kind of take control more in the Central game than against UHart, but take control, be the alpha dog of the offense, and score at will. He was so much better than everyone else, and there was no doubt about it. I was also really impressed with the freshman Adama Sanogo. Even though the Central bigs weren't anything to write home about, I thought he did a really good job against some more talented UHart bigs, which had a little bit more size, a little bit more skill. He did get into a little foul trouble, but a lot of those were kind of ticky-tack, borderline fouls. I don't know if those are always going to get called. He showed some real skill with his right and left hand on offense, and I really like the energy that he brought on defense and on the board. So I think he's a real piece, and I think he's going to offer a different type of energy when he comes in instead of Isaiah Whaley. Whaley's a lot bouncier, a lot more athletic, even higher energy, but Sanogo can really be that kind of big bruiser, Jeff Adrian type that, you really need when you're playing Big East conference games. So overall, I was pretty impressed. I'm excited to see how the team looks against USC, which is much stiffer competition and some legit big men in the Mobley brothers. But overall, pretty satisfied with how the team played so far.
Yeah, I'm not overly concerned with either performance and the aesthetics of it because, as you said, Madigan, they didn't have a ton of time to practice before. And when you're off the court and you're not playing very much and you don't have any exhibition games, then those first two games of the season, they were pretty much exhibition games because we knew UConn had no chance to lose to either Central or Hartford. Even when Hartford was making a run in the second half, I don't think even the most cynical UConn fans were overly nervous about it. Just you knew they were going to come away with that game. They were just so much more talented that their talent was going to bring them past. So I think the important thing is you get through those games with no injuries. You get a look at some of the new guys. You can get real games under your belt because obviously a real game is different than practice, even a scrimmage with officials like they had beforehand. So I think a guy that I was pleasantly surprised by was Isaiah Whaley, just because he finished the year so well. I wasn't super sure if that was just going to be a flash in the pan or if he was going to be able to take that performance last year and build on it. And at least through 2 games, I thought that he's built on that performance. And in my opinion, he's the best big that we have on this team right now because I think Sanogo did look really good, but in the end, he's still a freshman. And I don't know how much you want to be relying on a freshman, especially a big. And then Josh Carlton barely played in both games. So I don't really know what the situation is with him or why he isn't playing a whole lot, but Isaiah Whaley, I think, is pretty clearly the go-to big down low, and I think that's both just because of the people that are on the team at the moment and the way they're playing, but also that's due to Isaiah's performance and just the way he's looked so far. So I was very pleasantly surprised about him. On the other side, Andre Jackson, he was kind of billed as a guy, Hurley even said it, that is going to come in and have the same impact as a freshman as Bouknight. And if I'll be honest, 2 games shouldn't be an indication of what he's going to do all year, but through 2 games, I'm really not sure where Andre Jackson's going to contribute on this team. He's obviously very athletic. His dunk highlight reel is incredible, but he looked very nervous in that first game, which is understandable. So I'll give him a pass there, but he just doesn't really look comfortable on the court, and I don't know where he's going to contribute. If it's going to be rebounding, defense, just being a spark plug. It's hard for me to tell at this point, and I don't think you want to be questioning how your top recruit is going to be contributing to the team, because I think even the best players are going to find ways to help your team no matter what. And I didn't really see that through Jackson through 2 games, whereas we saw it from Sanogo. We knew that Javonte Brown was going to be a project coming in. Richie Springs is a redshirt freshman, also kind of a more project big. We didn't get a great look at him, so I was expecting more out of Andre Jackson, even though I wasn't expecting him to be a clone of Book Knight. So I was a little underwhelmed by him, and hopefully it's just freshman jitters. And once he gets a few more practices under his belt and the lights are brighter and he just kind of settles in more, that we'll see more of an impact from him.
Yeah, I would say certainly a high possibility that it's just a freshman jitters. And when it comes to the team, like you guys said, if you don't have the preseason, if you don't have exhibition play, especially with so many new guys trying to mesh together and figure things out, it's going to be tough. I think with Jackson in this case right now, there's also just so many people vying for that playing time that it might be tough for him to break through, which is certainly relevant. Connolly, I think you're underrating the cynicism of UConn fans a little bit, though. We were definitely seeing angry tweets early in the CCSU game before UConn pulled away. So UConn fans will always have that going for them. I think overall, right, you have to be so pleased with just the way they looked, given all of those circumstances that we just discussed. The fact of the matter is there's a lot of talent on this team. There's depth. There are people who it seems like you can count on. RJ Cole looks like he's going to be a difference maker, just eligible this year after transferring from Howard. Someone who, I think UConn has lacked assertiveness on the scoring end. And so, like you said, Madigan, great to see Book Knight demonstrating it and to have another guy. For me, the older guys as well, Whaley and Pauly, deserve a tip of the hat for the way they look. Guys that can be really consistent contributors. Same for another transfer in Tyrese Martin. And then Sanogo, I mean, yeah, he looks like the kind of big man that old school UConn Big East big man, which is really freaking exciting. So we'll talk a little bit more about the big men and how that's going to shape up. But something that is really important for UConn this year is to get the rotation right. And again, the lack of preparation, the lack of practices and exhibition games, I think is something that is really going to affect this UConn team, such that we need to curb expectations before Big East play as they start to play better teams. But the rotation is going to be tight. A lot of teams in the Big East are smaller anyway. So I think, we're going to see a lot of guards, but I don't know who do you, and also we've got a Cook coming back from injury. So how do we think the lineup is going to shake out in terms of who are those starters and then first few guys off the bench?
So I think a Cook, when he's healthy and once he's back and ready, he's going to either slide into the starting lineup or be that first guy off the bench. We saw the defensive presence that he brought last year. And if he makes even a minor leap or stays the same on offense, he's still extremely valuable to this team just from his length and athleticism alone. He got shut down as of today, the day before the USC game, due to a slight hamstring tweak, but shouldn't derail his timeline too much, maybe push things out a few days or so. But he should come back around conference play. I think, people have said like late December, January, around that time frame. That'll be a big deal. As for Jackson, Connolly, I know you might be selling your Jackson stock. I'm still buying it up, even though I wasn't that high on him when he came in. Not because he's not a good player. He's going to be a tremendous asset. He's, a top 50 recruit. But the big knock on him was his shooting ability. And we've seen glimpses of why that was an issue, or why scouts thought that was an issue in the first 2 games. But Hurley was really excited about the way that he played defense against Central. He was really the only player that Hurley mentioned by name that played really high quality defense end to end. And I think that's something to keep an eye on too. Even if Jackson can play a few minutes a game, 10 to 12 minutes a game early on, and provide really quality defense, guard multiple positions, rebound, and then run the floor, we know he's good in transition, right? We've seen those dunks. We've seen his ability to handle the ball a little bit. I think that's an asset too. I was also really impressed with Tyrese Martin. His numbers last year, or even in his career at URI, aren't necessarily eye-popping, but he's a great rebounder as a guard. He's around 6'6", I believe. He can guard multiple positions. He doesn't necessarily need to be a ball handler like RJ Cole or Jalen Gaffney, but he can still call his own number and score occasionally. So, Dan, I don't want to steal your comp, but I know you brought up Lassane Chroma. I think he's a poor man's Lassane Chroma. He's maybe not as well-rounded. I don't think he can hit the free ball as well, but it's still something that this team needs. As for Brendan Adams, I was a little disappointed with his shot selection. I think he might be one of the guards that we see getting phased out early on. He can certainly score. I think he had 15 points. He hit 3 or 4 threes against Central, but there was a lot of questionable shots, some long twos early on, and he's not somebody that should really be taking 8 to 10 shots a game when there's guys like RJ Cole, Book Knight, Tyler Polley available, especially from 3. I think he can still bring a lot of energy off the bench, and there's going to be times where Jackson or Martin are banged up, and Brendan Adams can certainly slip in and contribute, but I think he's probably the guy that is going to be phased out the most, at least in the backcourt.
I'm actually going to take the flip side of that. I really like what Brendan Adams brings off the bench. I think he's just a very well-rounded player. I don't think he does anything really well. I don't think he does anything poorly. He's a solid defender. He's a solid rebounder. He can score when you need him to. So I think he's a really good guy that you're going to want to keep on the bench. I don't think if he's starting, things probably aren't going well, but I think the starting lineup this year is just going to be really fluid. I think you put Book Knight in there, and then the other 4 spots are pretty much open. RJ Cole's probably going to stick in there and be a consistent presence. I would be surprised if Tyler Polley comes off the bench very much. Even Isaiah Whaley, I think, is probably going to stick in there. But I think what you're going to see is a Cook's going to come back, and I'd be very surprised if by the end of the year a Cook's not in the starting lineup, just because we saw how good he was last year. And there's the clip of Kamani Young during a timeout where Cook's coming off the floor and Kamani Young is screaming at him that he is the best player on the court and no one can stop him. And that's the Cook that I think we're going to see when he gets back to full health. So once that happens, there's no way he's not going to be in the starting lineup. So with that, I think him and Whaley can both be on the court at the same time because they definitely bring a different skill set. Polley, just with his veteran leadership and shooting ability, I don't see going on the bench. Book Knight, obviously the team's best player. I'd expect RJ Cole to hang on to that point guard job, but I also like Jalen Gaffney's game, so I wouldn't be surprised if he takes over the point guard role or the starting job. But he's also a nice piece to bring off the bench. And yeah, Tyrese Martin, I think, is just a really good glue guy off the bench, does all the dirty work on the court. He's never going to wow you with his stats. He's never going to make a SportsCenter top 10 play, but he's going to do things that help win you games. And that's really important on this type of team that UConn has. The front court, I'm a little less confident about the front court depth than I was at the beginning of the year, just because I don't really know where Josh Carlton is with only playing 3 minutes through those first 2 games. I don't think Javonte Brown's going to factor in a whole lot. Same with Richie Springs. I was very disappointed that Springs really didn't get a whole lot of time early, especially against 2 bad teams. So I think it's going to be a lot of Isaiah Whaley, and I think they're really going to rely on a Cook when he comes back, and Adama Sanogo too. So I think they're not as deep as I would have guessed that they would be at the start of the season. But at the same time, we're 2 games in, 2 very, very raw exhibition type games in. So maybe making sweeping statements like that isn't the way to go. And from what we've seen in Hurley's first 2 years is that players develop pretty significantly from the start of the year to the end of the year. So even if guys aren't playing a whole lot right now, like Isaiah Whaley last year, I still think they could factor into the rotation for the time being. But at least right now, I don't think this team has as much depth as we thought they would in the preseason.
Yeah, I think the benefit for UConn this year is, to use a term that football coaches like to overuse, they'll be able to be really multiple, right? They can have different types of lineups out there And like you said, if they want to go a certain way, they could put Cole, Gaffney, Booknight, and Polly and Whaley in there, right? And that's a like dynamic skill lineup. They can also go big and strong. I know Carlton is, we're not sure what the situation with him is at the moment, but I think they still, especially if a Cook is back, imagine a Cook and Sonogo in there, and we're back to the beasts of the Big East, which would be incredible. So I think the really good thing is just they've got a lot of different pieces that can work together. Again, their ability to optimize it, I am concerned about because of the lack of reps, because of the lack of games, and the lack of practice. But ultimately, end of the day, have to be really enthused by what we've seen so far and excited, especially as the competition will start to rise, especially going into the start of the Big East slate. So the Huskies will tip off at 7 p.m. on ESPN against USC. Madigan, what are your thoughts on this USC team? Clearly an upgrade in terms of competition. What do we know about them?
Yeah, they're definitely not Central Connecticut or UHart. They're fresh off a dismantling of a pretty good BYU team. They won 79-53 on Tuesday in Bubbleville at Mohegan. They kind of rely upon two brothers, the Mobley brothers, freshman Evan, one of the best freshmen in the country, probably a consensus lottery pick, maybe even a top 10, top 7 pick. Good athlete, 7-footer, good shot blocker, can step out and shoot the three a little bit. He's made 2 of his 3 attempts this year, but they've only played 3 games. So he's going to be a big problem for this UConn team, especially without a Cook. This is someone that a Cook would usually try and handle. Obviously, there's bodies between Isaiah Whaley, Adama Sanogo. Maybe we'll see a little more Josh Carlton, or maybe even some Javonte Brown-Ferguson for stretches, just because he's probably the biggest guy on the roster. But I'm a little worried about how UConn's going to match up with Mobley, especially with his brother, Isaiah, who's also around 7 feet. He comes in at 6'10", very similar profile, pretty good offensive rebounder, not as good on the offensive end scoring-wise, but still a skilled, talented big. And that's a really big front court for UConn that I can't really recall UConn going up against a team like that in recent memory. It's rare that you see a college team with that much size and skill, kind of like the Lopez brothers from those Stanford teams in like the early 2010s. So it'll be interesting. And they also have a talented guard in Taj Edie, a West Haven kid who's a senior and a talented scorer. So it's going to be a real challenge. I think in the backcourt, UConn can match up with them. They have the horses. James Booknight is going to keep UConn in a lot of these games just with his own. But I'm excited to see how the front court reacts to this legit NBA size and talent, and to see how RJ Cole plays against some strong competition. We're not playing against the schools in the MEAC anymore or against CCSU or UHart, and Cole's certainly talented enough to compete against these high major schools like USC, but it'll be interesting to see how he does in his first real taste of high quality Division I oppositions.
Yeah, you hit it, Madigan. I don't think the result of this game is really of huge importance, just because of they still really haven't had a huge preseason and a ton of time to be together. So I'm mostly just looking for how UConn stacks up right now to a team of this level, how some of the more go-to players on UConn do with the brighter lights against a better opponent, and where they stack up nationally, because obviously James Booknight has been getting mentioned as a potential All-American this year. So of course he's going to look really, really good against UHart and Central, but how does he look against a much better team in USC? So I think it's just a really good opportunity for a measuring stick, because I think this year, especially more than other years, you can't really take the beginning of the season as a great indicator of where teams are and where teams are going to be by the end of the season. So this would be a very good win if UConn can pull it off, but if they lose, I don't think it's the end of the world or it's any indictment on the job Hurley's doing. I think it's just going to be a product of how the preseason's gone and having so many new players and still trying to find an identity. So it'll just be good to see where this team stacks up at the moment and where they need to continue building going forward.
Yeah, I agree. We can't ever read too much, or well, in this situation, we can't read too much into the win-loss result. certainly we want to see them play competitively, keep their composure, look like they belong, I think, to kind of summarize some of what you guys said. Also, they need to stay out of foul trouble really clearly. That was something that killed them against Hartford. It seemed like everyone was deep into foul trouble towards the end of that game. Of course, they need to keep that in check because it can be really detrimental, especially against bigger teams. I was going to say, Madigan, in terms of the teams that had that size, it reminds me of Florida State a couple of years ago. We played them in Providence.
That's a good one.
They had like 2 7-footers. That was a tough matchup. That was a different UConn team, hopefully. But I think that front court matchup is going to be key. I mean, UConn, we don't know about Josh Carlton. We do not have a cook. So who are we depending on there? Who's going to be able to handle multiple really large dudes down there? I think it's going to be a tough matchup for UConn. I don't want to make predictions or anything like that, but I think it'll be a wake-up call for UConn, especially given the preparation phase aspect. If you listen to Dan Hurley's comments from his recent pregame media availability, he has been working them very hard in practice. I think it was also clear from his post-game comments how disappointed he was in the effort, really across both games. And he said even after we watched the film, there was even more that we disliked. So I think he's working them really, really hard. They've been in this situation kind of where they're not even sure if when they're playing. So there's always kind of that aspect of it too. But this is going to be a really tough game for UConn Thursday night. I'm not super optimistic about a win here. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, it should be pretty interesting. I was looking at KenPom, and you have to take this with a grain of salt, especially early in the season, and even more so in this crazy COVID year of 2020. So USC's ranked 45th in KenPom, and UConn's ranked 52nd right now. And there's some stuff that goes into this. KenPom's still relying on some numbers from last year, so it's not totally accurate. But this KenPom predicts this game to be really close. They have USC winning 72-71, 52% chance of winning. That kind of sounds right. It really could be a coin flip. I think USC has a major advantage in the front court, and I think UConn has a pretty solid advantage in the backcourt. So it's just going to really come down to which unit is stronger in Mohegan Sun. UConn is traveling to the bubble, but they're only going 30 minutes down the road. Whereas USC, they've been here for a few days, but they did have to come from across the country. So there's some interesting stuff that goes into it. It's a little early in the year. USC does have that extra game under their belt. They're 3-0. But yeah, it'll be interesting. And I think the lack of effort, definitely something that you can kind of see more in the UHart game than the CCSU game. That first half against Central, I think, is just borderline not even worth considering evaluating this team. But it should be pretty interesting. I'm looking forward to see how it shakes out.
Yeah, I don't really have a great sense of how this game's going to go either. I think it could be one of those games where UConn is kind of trailing for the entire game by 8-10 and just can't really close the gap, or it could be a back and forth affair. I feel like it's a pretty big toss-up just because of how early it is in the season and how much we really don't know about either team. So I'm really just looking forward to seeing how the two teams stack up to each other, and hopefully it'll be a good game, more watchable than the Central game, and really the UHart game was too. So just as long as UConn keeps improving, that's more important to me at this point than wins and losses.
Yeah, it'll definitely be an exciting challenge to see UConn take on, especially again with what we're expecting out of guys like Bouknight and Whaley in terms of taking a step up. Something to just think about with this USC team is they were definitely a good team last year, but at this point, they're counting on a lot of new pieces as well. So they have a little bit of the same challenge that UConn does. I think they have a little bit more of an established kind of culture and stuff going on there with the team. They've got Andy Enfield, engineer of our favorite NCAA tournament upset of all time with Florida Gulf Coast over Georgetown. But he's been there for a while, and I think they have a little bit more of that aspect of it together, but still relying on a lot of new guys to play key roles and starring roles. Edie himself is a graduate transfer, in addition to the freshman bigs that you mentioned, Dan. So, right, anything can happen. Anything can happen. It's kind of the motto of college sports and really anything this year. But excited to see UConn taking on a high major opponent and hopefully finding another game as well before they start the Big East slate. So something that they're looking for. We know they've got NC State on the schedule next officially, but they are looking for a game, I believe, ideally on the 7th of December. So we'll see how that goes.